In 1943, America was at war. Copper was desperately needed for ammunition, wiring, and military equipment. So the United States Mint made a drastic decision. They stopped making copper pennies. Instead, they struck pennies from zinc-coated steel. Millions of shiny, silver-colored cents flooded the country. But somehow, a few copper blanks were left behind. And when those leftover copper planchets slipped into the presses, history was made. One of those mistakes sold for over $1 million. And another reached an astonishing $1.3 million in a private sale that stunned seasoned collectors. This is the story of the 1943 copper wheat penny, the coin that wasn't supposed to exist, the mistake that became a legend, the tiny brown cent that turned ordinary Americans into headlines. And what happened next shocked the entire coin world. Picture this. It's 1943. The United States Mint is operating at full speed. The country is fully engaged in World War II. Copper is classified as a strategic metal. Every ounce matters. The mint transitions to steel cents coated in zinc. They look completely different from traditional pennies. Silvery, magnetic, cold to the touch. But in the rush of wartime production, a few copper planchets from 1942 remain in the machinery. They aren't removed. They aren't noticed. They're struck with 1943 dies. And in that split second, a forbidden coin is born. Collectors today still call it one of the greatest minting errors in American history. But here's where the mystery deepens. For years, people believed the 1943 copper penny was just a rumor, a myth whispered between dealers, a fantasy coin no one could prove existed. Then a teenage boy changed everything. In 1947, a young collector named Don Lutz Jr. found a 1943 copper penny in his change. He thought he had struck gold. When he contacted the Treasury Department, he was told it was impossible. They claimed no copper pennies were made that year. But he didn't give up. He kept the coin for decades. And after his passing, that very penny sold at auction for over $200,000. But that wasn't even close to the highest sale, because what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Another example surfaced. Then another. Slowly, experts confirmed that fewer than 20 genuine 1943 copper cents exist across all mints. Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco. Each one is a national treasure. Only one confirmed specimen is known. Just one dot. And when it crossed the auction block, collectors battled fiercely. Phones lit up. Private bidders stepped in. The tension was electric. The hammer fell at over $1.7 million in a landmark sale in 2010, not a single penny. 1 cent worth more than most homes in America. And that tiny detail is why it's worth millions. And most people miss it, because at first glance, it looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. The same design introduced in 1909. The same wheat ears on the reverse that millions of Americans saw every day. The wheat penny design, created by Victor David Brenner, had been circulating for decades. By 1943, nothing about the design screams rarity. The secret is the metal. That if you find a 1943 penny that looks brown or copper-colored instead of silver, your heart should skip a beat. But here's where the danger lies. Thousands of altered coins are out there. Some people copperplate steel cents to fake the look. Others file down the 8 in a 1948 penny to make it look like a 3. Unsuspecting collectors have been fooled, and some have paid dearly for it. First, the magnet test. A genuine 1943 copper penny will not stick to a magnet. Steel cents will snap right onto it instantly. That one simple test eliminates most fakes in seconds. But what happened next surprised even experienced dealers. Some counterfeiters used real copper planchets from other years and altered the date. These won't stick to a magnet either. That's why weight matters. A genuine 1943 copper cent weighs about 3.11 grams. A steel cent weighs about 2.7 grams. That tiny fraction of a gram could mean the difference between pocket change and $1 million. Then comes authentication. Serious collectors turn to companies like Professional Coin Grading Service and Numismatic Guarantee Company. These experts use microscopes, metal analysis, and dye diagnostics to confirm authenticity, because when a coin could be worth over $1 million, certainty is everything. Collectors were shocked when metallurgical testing confirmed that the copper content in genuine 1943 specimens matches 1942 bronze composition. That it proved once and for all that these coins were struck accidentally, not secretly authorized. and the market responded with frenzy. In 2010, a 1943 copper cent graded MS-64 by PCGS sold for $1.7 million. In private sales, estimates have reached $1.3 million depending on mint market condition. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on authenticated examples whenever they surface, because opportunities like this appear once in a generation. But here's the part that gives everyday Americans hope. Most of these coins were discovered in circulation, not in elite collections. Not in bank vaults. In pocket change. In jars. In dresser drawers. One man reportedly found his example while going through a handful of cents he received at a cafeteria. Another was discovered by a family sorting through an inherited coin. 10.1 moment, it was ordinary. The next, it was life-changing. But there's an even deeper layer to this story. The 1943 copper penny represents something powerful. IT represents accident meeting opportunity. IT represents paying attention when others don't. Millions of Americans handled 1943 pennies that year. Most saw steel and moved on, but a few saw copper, and that difference changed everything. Even today, steel cents are incredibly common. Over 1 billion were produced in Philadelphia alone. They turn up constantly, which means many people assume all 1943 pennies are worthless. That assumption is what keeps the dream alive, because every time someone dismisses a brown 1943 penny as just old, the possibility remains, and what happened next continues to fuel treasure hunters across the country. Modern coin roll hunters search through bank boxes weekly, hoping to spot that unmistakable copper gleam. Metal detectorists scan old properties where wartime coins once circulated. Estate buyers inspect jars that haven't been opened since the 1950s, because fewer than 24 genuine examples exist, and some experts believe a few remain undiscovered. Imagine opening an old coffee can filled with wheat cents. You pour them onto the table. Silver flashes everywhere. Then you see it. One brown coin among a sea of steel. Your pulse quickens. You reach for a magnet. It doesn't move. That silence, that stillness, that realization could be the beginning of $1 million story. But caution is critical. Check the date carefully. The numerals on genuine coins have specific shapes. The 1 is slender. The 9 is rounded. The 4 has a defined crossbar. The 3 has balanced curves. Under magnification, altered dates often show tool marks or uneven surfaces. Examine the mint mark if present. On Denver coins, the D should match known authentic placements and style from 1943 dies. Look for natural aging. Real copper from 1943 will show consistent patina, not bright, fresh plating, and never clean the coin. Cleaning can destroy surface integrity and reduce value dramatically. If you truly believe you've found one, handle it by the edges. Place it in a protective holder. Send it to a respected grading service for verification, because authentication transforms suspicion into certainty, and certainty transforms a penny into $1 million. The 1943 copper wheat penny is more than metal. It's wartime history. It's a minting accident. It's a reminder that even in times of national crisis, tiny oversights can create legendary treasures. And for U.S. collectors between 30 and 70, it represents possibility. You don't need a vault. You don't need insider connections. You need curiosity. You need patience. You need to look twice when others look once, because this tiny detail is why it's worth millions. And most people miss it. A copper flash in a year of steel. A mistake that slipped past quality control. A coin that defied government policy and turned into one of the most valuable cents ever struck. Somewhere in America, jars remain unopened, drawers remain unsorted, collections remain unexplored, and history has shown us that unbelievable discoveries still happen. So tonight, check your change. Pull out those wheat pennies. Search for 1943. Look for brown instead of silver. Test with a magnet. Weigh it if you can, and if the signs align, take that next step, because the next headline could be yours. The next auction frenzy could start with your coin. The next stunned room of collectors could be bidding on something that once sat quietly in your pocket. One tiny copper coin from 1944 has been valued at nearly $2 million. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. And that's exactly why so many people have spent it without a second thought. But what if I told you that one of the most valuable coins in American history could still be hiding in an old jar, a dresser drawer, or even your pocket change? In 1944, America was deep in war. Copper was critical for ammunition. The year before, in 1943, the United States Mint switched the Lincoln cent from copper to zinc-coated steel to conserve metal for the war effort. Those silver-colored 1943 steel pennies became famous. But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. In 1944, the Mint returned to using copper for pennies. However, a few leftover steel planchets from 1943 were accidentally struck with 1944 dies. Those rare 1944 steel cents are legendary. But the opposite mistake is even more shocking, that a handful of 1944 pennies were struck on leftover copper planchets from 1943. That's right. In a year when nearly every penny was supposed to be copper, a few were accidentally struck in the wrong metal during the previous year, and then somehow escaped detection. One young collector in the 1950s pulled a strange-looking 1944 penny from circulation. It didn't stick to a magnet like a steel cent should. It looked normal. Too normal. But something felt off. He saved it. Years later, experts confirmed it was one of the rare 1944 copper transitional error coins. A minting mistake so rare that only a small number are known to exist. Collectors were shocked. Dealers scrambled. Auction houses prepared for history. Because this was not just a coin. It was a wartime accident frozen in metal. And when one of these coins crossed the auction block, the hammer didn't fall at a few $1,000s. It didn't stop at 100,000. It surged into the stratosphere. One pristine example of the 1944 copper penny has been valued at nearly $2 million, depending on condition and authentication. $1 million for a 1-cent coin. But here's the detail that changes everything. Most people have heard of the 1943 copper penny, the coin that shouldn't exist. But very few realize that the 1944 copper error can be just as mysterious, and in certain conditions, just as valuable. And the difference between an ordinary 1944 penny and one worth life-changing money can come down to a tiny, nearly invisible detail. But before we reveal exactly how to spot it, you need to understand why this mistake even happened. In 1944, the United States Mint resumed using copper alloy made from recycled shell casings from military training grounds. These recycled metals gave 1944 pennies a slightly different composition than pre-war cents. But during the chaotic transition between steel and copper planchets, a few wrong blanks were fed into the presses at the Philadelphia Mint, at the Denver Mint, and even at the San Francisco Mint. Mint workers were producing millions of coins per day. Machines roared, dies slammed, planchets moved in bulk. And in that industrial storm, a handful of planchets from the wrong metal slipped through. No alarms went off. No one noticed. They entered circulation quietly, and for decades, they passed from hand to hand, completely unknown. But what happened next stunned the entire numismatic community. When the first authenticated examples were certified by major grading services like the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Company, the market exploded. Collectors realized they were looking at a genuine transitional error from one of the most dramatic periods in American history. These were not altered coins. They were not fakes. They were real mistakes made by the United States Mint during wartime production, and demand skyrocketed. At auction, authenticated examples have reached staggering prices. High-grade specimens have crossed well into 6 figures. And in pristine mint state condition, valuations have approached the $1 million mark. Imagine finding that in a coffee can full of old change. One man did in the early 2000s. A family sorting through an inherited coin collection discovered a strange 1944 cent. It looked slightly different, slightly off in color, slightly unusual in weight. They almost dismissed it, but curiosity won. When it was tested and authenticated, it turned out to be one of the rare 1944 transitional error pieces. Their ordinary inheritance became a 6-figure windfall. And here's the part most people miss. The 1944 copper penny that commands massive value is not just any copper 1944 cent. Because most 1944 pennies are copper. In fact, over 1 billion were minted. The answer lies in composition, magnetism, weight, and mint origin. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions. And most people miss it that a genuine rare 1944 steel error cent will stick to a magnet. A common 1944 copper cent will not. But in the case of the ultra-rare transitional 1944 copper struck on a leftover 1943 bronze planchet, The weight and composition must match pre-1943 standards exactly. The standard 1944 copper cent weighs about 3.11 grams. If you find a 1944 penny that weighs significantly different, around 2.7 grams, you may be looking at a steel core. But here's where it gets even more intense. Counterfeiters know this story. Some people plate steel cents with copper to fake a rare transitional piece. Others alter the date on a 1943 copper penny to look like 1944. And that's why authentication is everything. Experts examine the mint mark. They inspect the date under magnification. They study die characteristics unique to known genuine examples. They analyze metal composition using advanced testing, because a real one can change your life. And a fake one can crush a dream. In one major auction, bidding wars erupted between private collectors and investors. The final price climbed relentlessly. The room was silent except for the auctioneer's voice. And when the hammer fell, the price reflected history, rarity, and the raw emotional power of discovery. That single penny, once worth 1 cent, had become a symbol of American resilience during wartime. It became a trophy, a legend, a story that every collector dreams of repeating. And here's something even more thrilling. Many of these rare pennies were discovered decades after they were minted, not locked away in vaults, not preserved in museum cases, but found in circulation. In jars. In estate sales. In forgotten drawers. One man's pocket change became a $1 million miracle. First, check the date carefully. You're looking for 1944 on the obverse beneath Abraham Lincoln's profile. Second, examine the mint mark under the date. No mint mark means Philadelphia. A small d means Denver, and S means San Francisco. Rare transitional errors have been found for multiple mints, but Philadelphia examples tend to draw the most attention. Third, test magnetism. If your 1944 penny sticks to a magnet, that's a major red flag, because standard 1944 cents should not stick. A magnetic 1944 cent could indicate a rare steel error. Fourth, weigh the coin. Use a precise digital scale that measures to at least 1/100th of a gram. If the weight falls outside the expected range, do not ignore it. Fifth, inspect the surface. Look for signs of plating bubbles or uneven coloring that may indicate alteration. Genuine examples show consistent metal throughout, not surface tricks. And finally, never clean the coin. Cleaning can destroy value instantly. If you suspect you have something unusual, consult a reputable grading service. Authentication from top-tier grading companies transforms curiosity into credibility. And credibility is what unlocks serious money. Collectors across the United States are still searching rolls of wheat pennies every day. They are still checking inherited collections. They are still hoping, because history has proven that these coins can surface decades later. And every time one appears, the headlines return, the frenzy returns, the dream returns. And that dream is simple. Find something overlooked by millions. Hold history in your hand. Discover that what looked like spare change is actually a rare artifact from a nation at war. A mistake that slipped past quality control. A silent witness to 1944. And a potential ticket to financial freedom. But here's the truth most people don't want to believe. The majority of 1944 pennies are common. Billions were minted. Most are worth only a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition, but rarity hides in plain sight. And it only takes 1.1 coin. One moment of curiosity, one decision not to spend it. Collectors were shocked when the first examples surfaced. Dealers are still watching for the next.